In 2011, a young woman is standing in the cold gray sea near San Francisco, holding a kite she does not know how to fly. She runs a tiny company in Perth, in Australia, and she is frightened of this water. She has described it as dreary, cold, and shark-infested, and the sport as one that scares the hell out of her. She is learning it anyway, on purpose, for a business reason. The rich men who keep telling her no all kitesurf together at a private camp once a year. Learning their sport is her plan for getting into the room. Her name is Melanie Perkins. She has an idea for a much bigger company, and she has started asking investors for money. By the time anyone says yes, more than 100 investors will have said no. She keeps every rejection email. Today, the company those 100 investors turned down is valued at about $42 billion. Forbes puts her personal share of it above $7 billion. And the strangest fact in this story is what she did with that money, in the very week the price peaked. We will get to that. The company is called Canva, and it is a website for making designs, posters, invitations, presentations. If you have never heard of it, that is fine, because this video is not really about the company. It is about how a person with no advantages gets rich, step by step, with the numbers left in. Melanie Perkins started with no rich parents, no engineer, no contacts, and a home 15,000 kilometers from Silicon Valley. Every step she took is public, documented, and mostly embarrassing while it was happening. Watch what she does each time she is told no. That habit is the whole difference between her story and most people's. Melanie Perkins was born in Perth, on the far west coast of Australia, in 1987. Her mother was a school teacher, and her father was an engineer. At 14, Melanie Perkins ran her first business, selling handmade scarves at shops and markets around the city. At 19, she was at university in Perth, earning money on the side by teaching students how to use design software. The software was the professional kind, programs like Adobe Photoshop, built for trained designers. She watched ordinary students fight with it, and she has said it could take a whole semester to learn the very basics. Exporting one file in good quality could take 22 clicks. Her idea was that design would move into the web browser, where it could be simple, online, and shared. The idea was enormous, and she was a 19-year-old tutor, so she started with the smallest corner of it she could find. School yearbooks. Schools laid them out by hand, page by page, every single year. In 2007, Melanie Perkins and her boyfriend, Cliff Obrecht, built a website that lets schools design their yearbooks online. They called the company Fusion Books. Their office was her mother's living room in Perth. Neither of them could write software, so they paid a small local firm to build the site. The build was paid for with borrowed money, about $50,000 lent by friends and family, and a $20,000 bank loan that had to be paid back whether it worked or not. The first school paid in March of 2008. In the busy season, her mother stayed up at night feeding ink into the printers. Within a few years, Fusion Books was serving about 400 schools in Australia, New Zealand, and France. By the time this story leaves Perth, schools were paying the company about $2 million a year. A profitable small business is the safest place a young founder ever stands. Melanie Perkins has been clear that the yearbook company was only ever step one. Step two was the enormous version, the design tool for everyone on Earth. Step two needed two things she did not have: a serious engineer and serious money. Getting them took 3 years and more than 100 meetings that ended with the word no. Raising money from Perth had one total structural problem. Melanie Perkins had never met an investor, and neither had anyone she knew. The investment firms that fund young technology companies were concentrated in California, an ocean away. In 2008, she entered Fusion Books in a state inventors competition and came second. The next year, the organizers invited her back, and one of the speakers was an investor visiting from California. His name was Bill Tai. She got about 5 minutes with him after the event. He told her that if she ever came to San Francisco, he would meet her. In May of 2011, she went. The plan was a 2-week trip. She stayed 3 months, which was every single day her visitor's visa allowed her in the country. Her brother was studying in San Francisco, and she slept on the floor of his 1-bedroom flat. Her office was a table in a shopping center food court because the table was free and the Wi-Fi was free. Over those 3 months, she spent about $9,000 of her own savings on the trip. For a 7:30 breakfast meeting, she took the train at 4:30 in the morning. The meeting with Bill Tai happened at a cafe in Palo Alto. Her pitch was a paper printout. Bill Tai barely looked up from his phone. She has said she thought he was not liking her pitch at all because he was on his phone the whole time. She flew out of that lunch believing she had failed. Then introductions started arriving by email. Bill Tai had been listening and typing. One introduction mattered more than all the others together. Lars Rasmussen, the engineer who co-founded Google Maps. Rasmussen liked the idea and offered to help her find the engineer it needed. Then Lars Rasmussen rejected every single candidate she brought him. Bill Tai put his condition in an email. If the tech team looks solid, I'd be excited to back you. So the money would come after the engineer, and the kind of engineer who impressed Lars Rasmussen would not come before the money. Melanie Perkins was stuck in the middle of that circle for more than a year. The other meetings produced polite versions of the same 3 reasons. Australia was too far. One investor wrote that he was honestly, and unfortunately, not comfortable doing a deal in Australia. The company was too early. Another wrote that there was not a lot of excitement amongst his partners for a company that had not even launched. And always the team. Where is your engineer? She has said each no felt extremely painful and personal, and that in the middle of it, you have no idea if it will ever work out. One night in San Francisco, at what she has called her lowest point, she wrote herself a note. It said, "Mel, you're extremely tired. Nothing bad is really happening. You're just feeling depressed because you are used to achieving things quickly. There is no doubt you will succeed." Then her visa ran out, and she flew home to Perth. She has said she felt like a complete and utter failure. No money, no engineer, and 3 months of her savings gone. Most people at this point revise the plan. Melanie Perkins revised her geography. Bill Tai co-runs a private annual gathering called Mai Tai with a professional kitesurfer. It is an invitation-only camp in Hawaii, business talks in the morning, kitesurfing all afternoon, and about 150 investors and founders on the beach. The people who kept saying no to her by email would all be in one place, relaxed, for a week. So Melanie Perkins learned to kitesurf. This is the water from the start of the video, the cold sea near San Francisco, practiced in the gaps between investor meetings. Years later, she said that for the whole time she did the sport, she felt like she could just die at any moment. She did it anyway, because a door that only opens a tiny crack is still a door. Her own words, "You do what you can to wedge it open and walk through." In 2012, she and Cliff Obrecht flew to the camp in Maui. She was not on the speaking schedule. At 10 in the evening, she asked Bill Tai if she could pitch the whole camp in the morning, and he said yes. She stayed up rebuilding the presentation until 6 in the morning. In the morning, she pitched a beach full of the exact people who had been turning her down. Nobody agreed to invest that day. Most tellings of this story stop at the kitesurfing trick. The part that actually made her rich comes next, and it happened at a desk. Lars Rasmussen finally had a name for her, Cameron Adams, a designer and engineer who had worked at Google. Cameron Adams had helped build Google Wave, and he was exactly the kind of engineer the investors kept demanding. He also had his own startup, and he said no. Melanie Perkins did with Cameron Adams what she now did with everyone, kept the door open and kept sending better versions. Her pitch deck was rewritten so often that one she emailed him was numbered 44. Every question she could not answer in a meeting was moved to the front of the next version of the deck. Remember that habit, because the product is about to be built out of it. Months later, an email arrived from Cameron Adams with the subject line, "The answer." The message underneath said, "Is yes," followed by a smiley face. In June of 2012, Cameron Adams became the third co-founder. The company had a working name from an earlier era, Canvas Chef, which Melanie Perkins has called incredibly dorky. It became Canva. With an engineer that Lars Rasmussen approved of, Bill Tai's condition was finally met. A brand new Australian fund called Blackbird invested $250,000 before its own fund had even finished raising. After years of taking Bill Tai's advice, Melanie Perkins asked him directly whether he would invest, and he said yes. She asked how much, and he said $25,000. 1 hour of conversation later, Bill Tai had lifted his own number to $100,000. In total, investors paid about $1.6 million for their slice of the company. An Australian government program matched it with a grant of $1.4 million and took no share in return. $3 million announced in March of 2013. 3 years of no, and then all of it in about 9 months. The $3 million had bought a share of a product that did not exist. Canva had not launched, and there was nothing yet for a customer to use. What Melanie Perkins built over the next 5 months is where the $42 billion comes from. Before launch, the team paid strangers on the internet to try the product while the team watched recordings of them using it. The recordings were bad news. People were scared to click. They wandered, made something average, and left feeling dejected, which is her word for it. Melanie Perkins set one rule for the whole company. Every new person has a great experience within a couple of minutes. So a new user's first minutes were rebuilt as a toy. Canva opened with 5 tiny challenges. Change the color of this circle to red. Put a hat on this monkey. Each challenge took seconds, and each one ended with the user winning. She has said the point was confidence. People told all their lives they could not design, discovering within a minute that they could. The habit from the pitch deck, answering the hardest doubt first, had become the product. The public launch was planned for May of 2013. Melanie Perkins refused to launch in May because the product was not good enough yet. Investors had paid millions for a share of a company with no product, and now the product was late on purpose. Canva opened to the public on the 26th of August, 2013. 50,000 people were already on the waiting list. The product was free. You dragged pictures onto a page and the page looked right. 1 million photographs and graphics were inside it, and the premium ones cost customers $1 each. The how-to guide at the start ran 23 seconds. 22 clicks to export a file had been the old world. Then the product started doing its own selling. Every poster and invitation made in Canva went out into the world as a small advertisement for Canva. And when anyone searched the internet for a business card or a flyer, Canva's ready-made template pages were what they found. By the following year, 600,000 people had used it, and by October 2014, 1 million had signed up. Not one of those people had been persuaded by a pitch. The product did for each of them what she had spent 3 years doing in meetings. It won over a stranger in 2 minutes by itself. From 2015, Canva sold a paid version by monthly subscription on top of the free one. By 2017, the company says, it was profitable. Customers were paying it more money than it was spending. In 2018, new investors valued the whole company at $1 billion. In April 2021, at a $15 billion valuation, Forbes began listing Melanie Perkins and Cliff Obrecht as billionaires. In September 2021, investors valued Canva at $40 billion, with 60 million people using it every month. The next year, technology prices fell everywhere, and one of Canva's own earliest investors marked its value down to about $26 billion. By 2025, the mark was back around $42 billion. Customers were now paying the company about $3.5 billion a year, mostly a few dollars at a time. More than 200 million people now use it every month, and most of them have never paid a cent. So the honest answer to the title of this video has two halves. She picked a product that could prove itself to a stranger in 2 minutes, free, with no salesman in the room. And for the 3 years before that, she treated every single no as instructions for the next attempt. The 100 rejections turned out to be the research. Folded in one at a time, they built the pitch, the team, and the 2-minute product. Now the cost. Melanie Perkins has written that there is no such thing as an overnight success, just a lot of hard work and overcoming challenges one by one. Hers took 14 years, from her mother's living room to the top of the valuation. She kitesurfed for 5 years, frightened, and then finally let herself retire from the sport. In 2019, on a holiday in Turkey, Cliff Obrecht proposed to her with a ring that cost $30. The company was already worth billions of dollars, and Cliff Obrecht has said they do not see the need to accrue wealth. They married in January 2021 on a small island off Perth. 8 months later came the week Canva was valued at $40 billion, the highest price in its history to that point. That same week, Melanie Perkins and Cliff Obrecht pledged the vast majority of their shares, about 30% of Canva, to a charitable foundation. At that week's price, the pledged shares were worth about $12 billion. This was the envelope from the start of the video. Melanie Perkins wrote that being called a billionaire had always felt strange. In her words, "It has never felt like our money. We've always felt that we're purely custodians of it." Their written plan, filed publicly, is 2 sentences long. Step 1, build one of the world's most valuable companies. Step 2, do the most good we can do. She has also said that if the whole thing was about building wealth, that would be the most uninspiring thing she could possibly imagine. Go back through the story and count what getting rich actually took. $9,000 of savings, 3 months on a floor, 3 years of no, and 5 years of being afraid in the water. There is no trick on that list, only prices, and she paid every one of them. The last picture in this story is the first one. A young woman from Perth standing in cold water she was afraid of, holding a kite she could not fly. She was frightened the entire time. She went anyway. If you want to watch a founder delete almost everything his app did and then sell what was left to Facebook for $1 billion, the next file is Kevin Systrom. His app was about whiskey. Thanks for watching.